Hello and welcome back to Galgorm Hall, and a happy new year to every single one of you. It's been a little bit longer than I expected before I was going to get a video out to you again. I took a little bit more time off from the layout over Christmas, and it's been hard just to sort of get back into the groove of things since the new year came around. But I have been back at work, and as you can see over my shoulder here, I've been working on the level crossing gates for the branch line. So let me take you over to the workbench and I'll show you how I put them together. I've basically taken this design and I've transferred one gate onto graph paper. This has been done to scale for the roadway that I will be spanning. My road is approximately 110 millimeters in width, so these gates are sort of divided down to half of that. In this case it's 52 millimeters wide and it's sitting 17 high. Now you hopefully can see there that I have drawn an inner line and an outer line, and that's just to help guide with the plastic or the plastruct that we're going to be using here. 1 mil square plastruct, and we're going to lay that down along our top line there in between the black lines, and I'm going to use a little bit of Tamiya masking tape, and it's basically just to hold it in place while we start gluing the other sections down. Okay, with that in place and in the correct space, what we can do first of all is to trim that edge, and I'm trying to put the blade right along the outer black line to trim that and give it as vertical a cut as is possible. And that's our upright done. We'll take our next one and we'll do the one side of it. And we'll just use a wee dab of contact adhesive from Revel, but any of your glues will work perfectly well in this, and something with a fairly quick drying set is probably beneficial too. Okay, and that's that one, and I'll leave that extended bit just for the time being. Now I need another strip of plastic card or plastruct, and this time we're going to measure out the bottom and we'll cut it in advance. And then we'll do the same with the other end piece. And that's our outer frame of the gate complete. The little semicircular corners need doing, and for that I'm just using ordinary plastic card that I use for all my other model making. But what I'm going to use is a hole punch, and if we punch out a hole, we can take this and we'll halve it, and then we'll take one of those halves and we'll quarter it, and of course I've lost a piece of it. And then we can add a wee drop of glue to those and put them into the corner. The hole punch actually works out approximately 6 mil diameter on the hole punch, and I had actually drawn this up with 3 mil quarter circles, so it couldn't have been more useful. So our 2 quarter sections are in, and now we'll go back to that plastruct, the 0.30 one. So we're basically just again following the line of the the drawing. I will lay that there. We'll give it a cut, and hopefully that is okay. Best with these ones here to check your measurements before adding the glue, because there may well be a slight discrepancy. It's an awful lot more difficult to get an absolute accurate cut. And probably the most difficult one to do is this next one, because the angle at the end is so shallow. But it's important just for the look of it to try and get that angle accurate. Otherwise it looks very clunky at the bottom. But the cutting it's quite difficult. I'll add that in. Right, that only leaves 3 to do, and they're much simpler. There we are. So that's the outer frame, the quarter circles and the 5 bars in place. We'll give that about 5 minutes just to go off a little bit, and then we can lift that off the graph paper here. Okay, so with a craft knife, just run it in underneath your strip the whole way around. Just take care with it, take your time. Just lift that there too. Now at this stage it still will be quite flimsy and needs to be handled with care. So we've now got 2 identical gates. If we turn them over onto their backs, where the internal parts of it are flush with the outer part of the gate, what we want to do now is to overlap them. Like so, and we'll glue that into place, and that will create your gate. And like I say, with the one that I've already made, you know, it's a good solid structure, and once it's painted up I think it's going to look pretty good. With the gates now made, we can move on to making the gate posts, and as you can see by the wonkily displayed pair of gates, I have already completed one side. So how did I get to that point? We're using 3mm square rod, which is hollow. Now I opted originally for the hollow rod because the idea initially was to apply a lamp on each of the posts. However, I haven't as yet found anything that is small enough that looks right. Any of the heads of the lamps tend to be 6-7mm in diameter, and it's just too large on the top of these little finials here, so I'm going to leave that as is, but I could come back to it and retrofit them at a future date. So at least by using the rod it gives that option. All I'm going to refer to is the height of the to cut the rod above the gate. Now I have gone for 3mm. I have a small mark made on this this piece of rod here as to where the top of the gate is, and I'm going to measure 3mm above that, and then I can make a cut. And this rod isn't very easy to cut. It may be better to use a razor saw, but I'm just going to go for sheer brute force and ignorance, and we're through. Now the little posts or the capping to go on top of this rod is two layers. The first is going to be a 4mm square piece of plastic card, and this plastic card has already been cut to a strip of 4mm. So all I have to do now is mark off a 4mm mark on the card. I'm just trimming that off. It's slightly skew width, and then I can trim that. And with a dab of glue, which end is the top end now? See if I can find my mark. That end there. We can apply it, and it is the easiest way of doing it, is to put it on upside down, and you try and center it as much as possible initially, and it'll save you having to tweak about with it too much. So that's the first stage. I'll just land that there, and then the next one excuse me, is a 3mm strip of plastic card, and again this has been cut in a 3mm length, and all I have to do is measure off 3mm on there and give it a cut. And with this one here, a little dab of glue on the previous one, and we'll set it into place, and again we'll try and center it up as much as possible. And that's your gate post done. Right, we'll come back to that in a minute. That'll give that time to dry while we work on the actual gate. Now once you have finished gluing your two halves of the gate together, it's probably a good idea just to give the whole thing a sand down, to give it that little bit of a gap between gate and post. Is take our little pin vise, and in that there I have a 6mm, I think it's maybe even a 6.5mm bit, and sort of centering it on one of the quarter circle sections, we're just going to drill into the gate. Not too much, it's just enough basically to anchor the little piece of rod that we're going to use. Go too far and you're actually going to go right through it. I mean, at the end of the day, these frames of the gates are only 1mm deep, so there's not an awful lot to work with, but it's just enough to give you a little anchoring point for the glue to bite, and we'll do that on both points. Okay, and we're trying to center those as much as possible, and in actual fact the joining line between the two pieces of gate that were made gives a great marking for that center line. So once that's done, we need to take some 6mm florist wire. Now you could use any sort of wire, it doesn't have to be the florist wire. You could probably brass wire or anything like that, and obviously it needs to be less than the what is that? That's going to be 2mm wide now, the overall gate, but something as fine as possible. And I'm trimming no more than about 5mm of wire. Now this is the point where it tends to disappear on you, like so, and on a green cutting mat it's even worse. And with a blob of super glue, we'll dip that into it and put it into our gate. Now at this point you want to try and make sure that you have it nice and level with the gate frame itself, and also centered, that it's not leaning off to one side. And we'll repeat that process for the other one. Take your post and wherever your marking is for the top of your gate, line that up as best you can and mark a centre point on the post where those little pieces of rod or pieces of wire come in contact. And then again with our pin vise, we're going to drill 2 holes in this post. And again, try and do them as centrally as possible. Now we'll test fit them at this stage just to see what the gap is between gate and post, and yeah, to me that's too much, so I need to trim off 1 millimetre or so. And again, it's just another little dab in the super glue. It doesn't take an awful lot on each, and we'll just feed that into the gate post. And if there is a slight discrepancy in terms of the length of those little bits of wire, just sort of judge it by eye as to how straight and even the gap is. And that's that. Now, one final thing. Most level crossing gates would have had the round red disc in the centre of it, half on each gate. And having looked at a number of different photographs of actual gates, they do come in various sizes, but the problem in this scale is trying to cut good round circles, if you know what I mean. So I had a wee rummage through the scraps box. I did first of all try a little bit of a plastic card hole punched out. To me it looked a little bit small. These are perhaps a little bit big, but in all honesty both seemed to feature on the network, so there's probably no right or wrong reason on that. But what I did find was, and you may well have something similar in your own scraps box, is one of these old Airfix platform accessories packs. And if you know this this set, it comes with the little swan lampposts, and the swan lampposts had circular bases in which to fit the actual post into, and that's what I've used. I've basically used a Stanley knife. It's very hard plastic, and with a bit of pressure cut right through the centre line there. Now it does leave a little nick of a hole left, and I've just sanded that right down as far as possible until it's nice and smooth. You can maybe just see the very tiniest amount of a nick still in it there. So cut that in half and then just apply it to the gate. Now this basically is the completion of those gates. I'll go away and I'll prime them, and I'll finish up with just a very quick touch on painting and weathering. Before I start painting the gates, I'm just going to take the opportunity to add some bolts to the bottom of each gate. Now these will just help hinge the gate closed whenever it's sitting across the road. So take a pair of pliers and just bend a little bit of florist wire to an L shape, and then cut yourself probably about 10 mils of a length off of that, and you're left with just this little L piece shape of wire. This is the same florist wire that we use to attach the gates to the post. Once that's done, just use some super glue and apply it to the piece of wire and add it to your gate. I've laid this gate up alongside the other one just so I can align the two bolts similarly. And then once that's done and dried, a little touch of black enamel paint will just finish that little section off. So I'm using a little bit of scarring pad and some sort of rusty oxide acrylic paint. That's a mix of a brown and black in there, and I'm going to remove most of it, and then I'm just dabbing it on to the red discs on each of the gates. That's just going to sort of represent an element of rust appearing on those gates. It doesn't show up too well on camera here, but whenever you see the photographs at the end of the video, you'll be able to see the effect an awful lot better. So the final stage then, and I've just put this in a bit of a time lapse to speeden up the process. It's a mixture of green, brown and black acrylic paint, and I'm basically applying it right across the entire gate. Now this is heavily watered down, and as you can see there, I'm using the tissue to clean the brush and remove any excess paint that I don't want. The idea is just to give it a little bit of a mildewed look. It's not pristine, but it's not completely unkempt either. And really, this is very much just down to personal taste, how much or how little of this sort of application of paint you wish to apply to it. And don't forget those end pieces. They may not be seen whenever the gate's closed, but it's always good just sort of to complete the entire project. And finally, it is putting it into position, and with those little drop down bolts in place, I need to use the pin vise just to drill a little hole in the roadway, and I'm just marking it up there. And once it's marked up, we can just drill the hole out, and that'll have it ready for the gate to go into place. I've used PVA glue just to attach the post to the side of the road, and a wee dab of super glue on the drop down bolt to attach it to the roadway. And there we have it. The gates are in place, and it's another little project completed in Galgorm Hall. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and please leave those comments below, and if you would like to subscribe to the channel, please do so. And until again, I'll chat to you soon. Bye now.